Qatar Airways are known as the world's best airline, but most of the focus is placed on their long-haul products such as the fantastic Q suites in business class. My question is, what are they like within the Middle East on a shorter route? Today I'm going to find out as I fly the Airbus A320 from Kuwait to Doha. Welcome to Edgington Airborne. Let's get going.
Now, if you're new to the channel, this is the part of the video that ordinarily I'd give you a little tour of Kuwait Airport and what to expect as you pass through Terminal 1 for your flight. However, I don't have any footage. This was caused by a few reasons, which I'll go through now, but if you want to skip this part, I'll pop the time on the screen that you need to get to make your way to the flight. However, if you are sticking around, let me explain my views on Kuwait Airport to you. Now, before I travel to any airport, I do a lot of research online to find out what to expect. I do take most of it with a pinch of salt because people generally are more negative online than they are positive. So I'd read a few horror stories about Kuwait Airport, and sadly, most of them were true. I had a bit of a delay on my previous flight, first of all, which meant that I had around about 1 hour and 40 minutes on the ground in Kuwait. That was after a delay in Dubai on my previous Emirates flight. I'll put a link on the screen for that one too. When I landed in Kuwait, though, with 1 hour and 40 minutes to go, I wasn't too concerned because I've had much tighter connections at much busier airports than this. The first thing I needed to do, though, was get a visa. Now, of course, I've entered the country without a visa. You might think I'm mad, but like many Middle Eastern countries, you get a visa on arrival. Not a problem. In Kuwait, though, rather than an e-visa, you have to go to an actual office. This is on departures level, so I headed there first. Little point there, it's not particularly well signposted. Here's where our problems really started to get going though, and that is the fact that the staff that I encountered in this visa office were some of the most unfriendly people I've ever met in my life. They couldn't have been less interested in me or other passengers around me if they tried. First of all, you have to get your passport photocopied and they give you a sheet and you have to fill it out. I did this with one member of staff who barely looked at me. They were more interested in chatting to their colleagues and even taking a call on their mobile during the whole process. Once I filled out the paperwork, they were going through my passport, they were laughing, they were joking, they were ignoring me as much as possible. A few little comments made to me, but that's about it. So it wasn't really the nicest of ways to get a visa in an airport, but it's one of those things. I then made my way downstairs to go through customs and immigration, something of course you do on pretty much every flight, particularly entering a new country. When I got downstairs to this area, the queues were horrendous. Well over 40 minutes I spent in the queue. It took a really long time, which was weird because the airport didn't seem that busy as I went through it. There weren't that many flights on the ground. It just felt like the whole environment wasn't particularly well geared up for the amount of passengers it can take. But I did queue up for 40 minutes as I mentioned and got to the front of the queue to meet the immigration officer and the customs officials. Now, I'm always very friendly to these guys. They're doing a great job. They're pretty much the last line of defence for any country letting people in. I'm always very polite, introduce myself, say hello, ask how they are. The person I spoke to, again, paid me no attention whatsoever. Didn't even look up from the desk, in fact, just grabbed my passport off me, started working on their computer. I just stood there for about 5 minutes staring into space as I was ignored, and then they just slammed the passport down on the desk and pointed for me to go away. Welcome to Kuwait. Now, I may sound like I'm being really harsh, but it wasn't the nicest of welcomes I've had to a country ever. And I had been flying around the Middle East, so cultural, it didn't really fit in with everything else that I'd seen in the Middle East. Thankfully, there were some positives though. Because of my tight connection, which was, as I said before, 1 hour and 40 minutes, the time it had taken to get through meant I had, well, just over half an hour before departure, and Qatar Airways check-in was closed at this point. That was fairly obvious. It was read it online. They closed around about 60 minutes before, in fact. Thankfully, there were still some staff around the Qatar Airways desks though, and they were brilliant. They were very understanding of the situation that I found myself in, and they made sure they got me on board the aircraft. I had checked luggage that I was going to send through. They said it'd be best to take it through as cabin luggage as long as I didn't have any large liquids, which I didn't. So they gave me a boarding pass fairly quickly. Now, one issue I did then find was at security itself. Now, as you know, if you're a frequent traveller, if you do have liquids, they have to be small containers in a clear plastic bag at most airports, much like this one here. This is the one that I get at Birmingham Airport. They give them away for free at Birmingham, by the way, and I use these bags all around the world. Never had a problem with them until I got to Kuwait. In Kuwait, this is unacceptable. This is the bag that's acceptable. It's bigger and has writing on it. That's the only real difference I could see, but I had to get one of these first of all. It just slowed the whole process down, which meant sadly, as I said before, I didn't have any time for any footage. So overall, my thoughts on Kuwait Airport, and I really don't want to sound too negative here, but they're not positive. It's certainly Terminal 1, not somewhere I'm looking to travel through in the near future if I can help it. But thankfully, despite my troubles and delays in Kuwait Terminal 1, the rest of the journey got an awful lot better. So let's get on board the aircraft. After my rather stressful visit to Kuwait Airport, believe me when I say I was delighted to be airborne on my first ever Qatar Airways flight and heading for Doha. As I mentioned in the intro, Qatar Airways are well known for their long-haul premium service, but as well as the likes of the 787, A350 and the A380, the airline also operates over 30 Airbus A320 aircraft like this one for shorter routes or those with less demand. Now the A320 is a very common aircraft type around the world, so let's see what the world's best airline can do to stand out from the competition. Firstly though, if you're considering flying with Qatar Airways, what will it cost? There are several direct flights on this route daily, and a quick search offered fares from 52 Kuwaiti dinar, which is around £133. This is based on the cheapest economy saver ticket, but that does still include standard seat selection and a very generous 30kg checked luggage allowance. Anyway, back to my flight, and let's start by taking a look at the cabin. The Qatar Airways A320 seats up to 144 passengers, with 12 business class seats and a further 132 in economy, which is in the standard 3-3 layout. As this flight wasn't too full, there was plenty of space available for cabin baggage in the overhead lockers, and as you might expect, reading lights and individual air vents are found in the panel above your head. This particular aircraft wasn't fitted with the latest LED mood lighting that you might find on some airlines, but there were some nice little touches from Qatar Airways, such as the airline's logo on the seatbelt, and there was even a bottle of eau de toilette in the toilets, which also provided baby changing facilities, and the toilets, much like the rest of the aircraft, were in very good condition. Now for me, the difference between a good and a great flight usually comes down to the cabin service, and Qatar Airways certainly didn't disappoint on this journey. As a reminder, this flight lasted just 1 hour, so I was very impressed when the crew handed out refreshing towels. That's something that I genuinely wasn't expecting, and the pillow placed on my seat was a nice touch too. The main cabin service was completed quickly but certainly wasn't rushed, and all passengers in economy were offered a bottle of water and a snack box. Now let me make this clear. The chicken pastry, which was served hot, was delicious, and I am never going to complain too much when I'm offered cake.
Meal service is over and we're halfway to Doha. Now let's have a look at the seat that you could expect to find aboard the A320 with Qatar Airways.
Qatar Airways sometimes use the A320 on flights of up to 6 hours, and to keep passengers occupied, the airline provides a 15-inch entertainment screen which can be tilted to offer a better viewing angle should the passenger in front recline their seat. Below the screen is where you'll find USB power to keep your devices charged, and a coat hook should you need it. Now, much like on larger long-haul aircraft, the tray table can be used in two ways. When left in half, there's space for a drink, or of course you can fully extend the table, which offers plenty of room for the in-flight snack. If required, there is also some adjustment enabling you to bring the table a little bit closer. As we secure the table, let's take a look at the seat pocket, and at the front is a handy little storage area which allows you to keep smaller items such as a mobile phone close by, and more space is available in the main literature pocket, which is where you'll also find the safety card. Now, on the longer routes that this aircraft operates, legroom is of course key, and I found the space provided, while maybe not the best in the world, is perfectly adequate for someone 6 foot tall like myself. There are, however, a couple of small issues with the economy seat, one of which is the large entertainment box, which does slightly restrict the floor space, and as pleased as I was that headrest was provided, I did find it to be a little bit too large. Overall though, despite these issues, I found the seat to be very comfortable, but what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments. I briefly mentioned the entertainment system a few moments ago, but now let's take a closer look at Oryx One. The touchscreen system is very user-friendly with easy to navigate menus which take you to an impressive range of content. There's a selection of feature films on offer, including the latest Hollywood releases, as well as some shorter programs that you can catch up on your favourite shows. Of course, younger passengers are also well catered for in the children's section. As the flight was so short, I didn't have much time to watch the content, but did manage to learn a little about the airline and enjoy some lovely footage of the aircraft. Thankfully, Qatar Airways provided a helpful reminder to me to post on social media, and of course I did share images and updates of this flight on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which by the way is where you can track all of my travels and find out the latest channel news too.
So we've just heard from the flight deck, it's almost time to land in Doha. Make sure to stick around till the end of the video for my final thoughts on today's trip, but for now, enjoy the landing. So that's it, welcome to Doha. I'm just at my hotel getting ready to catch a few hours sleep before my next flight, but before I do that, it's time to share with you the good and the bad about today's experience. Starting off at Kuwait Airport, as I mentioned earlier in the video, my apologies, I couldn't give you some footage as I normally do in these videos, but I was a bit rushed getting through the terminal due to a late arrival of my previous flight, and then the delay was compounded by the fact it took me an eternity to actually make my way back to the gates as I had to collect my luggage and go through the visa and immigration controls. Now, I'd read a lot about this before I travelled to Kuwait, and I recommend you do too. If you do, you'll know what I mean about the issues I faced there and why it took me so long. But of course, the focus of any of these videos is the flight itself, and this was a very nice introduction to Qatar Airways, I must say. Starting off with the aircraft and the cabin itself, and the seats I found to be very comfortable. There was a decent amount of legroom, there's good support, good padding on them as well. One thing I will say about the seat though is the headrest, while it was adjustable, it was very, very large, and I found it uncomfortable and difficult to find a position where I quite enjoyed it, so that's something to consider on a longer flight. Another thing to mention about the seat, as you'd have seen, is it does feature in-flight entertainment, which is a real treat for me, with many of my flights in the A320 in Europe certainly not offering this. And the in-flight entertainment had a really, really impressive selection in my opinion. Again though, one little thing to mention about it, it's not the most modern of systems, so the responsiveness and the definition of the screen maybe weren't up to standards that you see on some newer aircraft or larger jets, but that is really nitpicking. The cabin crew today, well, they were a real credit to Qatar Airways. I've read great things about Qatar Airways crew, and they didn't disappoint today. When I got to the aircraft, I was a little bit stressed, a little bit frazzled. The crew spotted this, and they were very friendly as I got on board. Then I got to my seat and noticed some passengers had decided to take my seat. I raised this with the crew and said, "Don't worry about it, I'm tired, I'll just sit on the aisle seat." About 5 minutes later, remember, the cabin crew came down and tapped me on the shoulder. They'd got me an empty row. It was really, really appreciated and very nice touch of them. And of course, they did perform a great service on board today's flight as well, a really quick sector, but they did offer a drink and a snack, and that snack was really, really tasty in my opinion. So overall, as an introduction to Qatar Airways, as I say, this was a good one, and I can't wait to try them again on a much longer journey on one of their major wide-body aircraft, which for me is very, very soon, and you can see that video on the channel very shortly. Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, do hit that thumbs up button and leave me some feedback in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from your opinions on the video and your experiences of Qatar Airways. If you're new to the channel, do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss a future video. And most of all, take care.